going on, guys? Today's video is a recording from my second topical Bible study, which is on creating vision for your life. Creating vision for your life is extremely important for every man to do because it gives you a direction that you're taking your life. I pray that this blesses you and that you learn a great deal from it. Enjoy. All right, let's get started. So for the sake of these two, could somebody pull up Proverbs 29, verse 18 again?
Yeah, I think we both had stuff.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yep, you go.
Okay, so 19, 18, sorry. Where there is no revelation, people cast off restraint, but blessed is the one who heeds wisdom's instruction.
Okay. James, could you read yours again, please?
Yep. Where there is no prophetic vision, the people cast off restraint, but blessed is he who keeps the law.
Good. So they cast off restraint. It's very interesting to me how there's so much differentiation in that particular verse, the way that it's interpreted. But like I said before, I think it's the version that I have that says that without vision the people perish. Although casting off restraint, we understand that casting off restraint from ourselves does cause us to perish because there's freedom that's found in discipline. There's freedom that's found in being in the disciplines and the instructions of the Lord. So when it comes to having vision, as I was saying, vision and dreams, and I want to talk about dreams for just a little bit. I think that these are two different things, but vision is really important for a man because you have to take your life in a particular direction, and that's what vision does for you.
I think you said you wanted to start recording again?
Yep, I already got it going.
Cool.
So, dreams. To me, my understanding of the way that these two things are different is that dreams are they're the things that you would like to happen in your life. And I think that it's really important for us as Christians to have big dreams that we cannot accomplish on our own. I have two great books that are written by a man named Mark Batterson. And his story is very impressive. He went from basically, he had a full ride scholarship to college to do something business related. And he heard the call of the Lord on his life at about 19. And he said, I'm going to go to seminary, which is not paid for whatsoever. So he went to seminary, became a pastor, and tried to start a church in Chicago, and it completely failed. So he heard the call of the Lord again. He went out to Washington, D.C., and started a church in a movie theater. And after, I think it's been 30 years since he started his church there, he now has 8 campuses. Okay, so like Mount Hope, the church that we go to, has 2 campuses. He has 8 campuses in Washington, D.C., and a coffee shop because he had big dreams. And he talks about big dreams in his books, In a Pit with a Lion on a Snowy Day and Chase the Lion. Fantastic books about having big dreams. But they're different. Dreams are different from vision in that vision is the thing that you are working towards. Vision is a little more solid, if that makes sense, because you are able to take the steps. You know the steps to get to that end state. Does this make sense? It's like David dreamed about the temple, but Solomon built it, and he's the one who had to make the blueprints for it. David had the dream, but Solomon had the vision. Do we understand how this works a little bit? So when we talk about having vision for our lives, it's really important that we not just let it remain a dream. Somebody might say, I want to have a 6-figure job. Well, if you actually want to have a 6-figure job, you need to work for it. You need to accumulate the experience that's required. You have to actually go into a field that will make you 6 figures, or you have to make a business that's successful so you can make that kind of money, right? It requires effort. To that end, vision is a direction that you are taking your life. It is a direction that you take your life in all things. Life is not a bunch of lines that you don't cross. It is a direction that you take your life. Because if life is just a bunch of lines that you don't cross, eventually you'll cross them. But if you take your life in a direction, this is especially true, a little sidebar, this is especially true when we talk about purity, getting to marriage pure, right? Because when it's good to set up boundaries and to have boundaries and to enforce them, but they can't just remain boundaries. You need to have an end state in mind, and that is that I'll make it to marriage pure and my marriage will be better for it, which it absolutely is. Absolutely is. So it's a direction that you're taking your life, and that is your vision. And this can also be reversed. And what I mean is, you can say that I want to have a beach body, but if you don't live like you want to have a beach body, then your vision is not what you say it is. So there's good vision, and there's bad vision. Let's move to Matthew 25. When we talk about having good vision and bad vision, this is more so what this is about. But having good vision and bad vision, it's good to have a good version of your life that you're working towards. It's also good to know what your life would be like if you didn't work towards this good goal. It would kind of be like envisioning a really terrible life that you would live if you did not eat healthy. Like it's a little bit of, we don't want to be motivated by fear, but it's good to know the consequences of not living a life that is purpose-driven. Does that make sense? So, Matthew 25, verse 14, if somebody could read that for me. 14 through 23.
All right. Okay, I can do this one.
Yep.
Again, it will be like a man going on a journey, who called his servants and entrusted his wealth to him. To one he gave 5 bags of gold, to another 2 bags, and to another 1 bag, each according to his ability. Then he went on his journey. The man who had received 5 bags of gold went at once and put his money to work and gained 5 bags more. So also, the one with 2 bags of gold gained 2 more. But the man who had received 1 bag went off, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. After a long time, the master of those servants returned and settled accounts with them. The man who had received 5 bags of gold brought the other 5. Master, he said, you entrusted me with 5 bags of gold. See, I gained 5 more. His master replied, Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. The man with 2 bags of gold also came. Master, he said, you have entrusted me with 2 bags of gold. See, I have gained 2 more. His master replied, Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. You said through 24, right?
Through 23.
Okay, so that was 23.
That was 23? Good. Somebody go to Matthew 7 for me, please. So the part that we can talk about this in just a good work ethic perspective, but more so what I want to focus on is what the master says to the servant who did well. Well done, good and faithful servant, enter into your master's happiness. Keep that in mind as we read Matthew 7, verse 21 through 23. Anybody got it?
You said 21 through 23?
Yep, 21 through 23. Go, Kenny.
Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only he who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. Many will say to me on that day, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name, and in your name drive out demons, perform many miracles? Then I will tell them plainly, I never knew you. Away from me, you evildoers.
Yeah. So these are the 2 things that I want to keep in mind. Well done, good and faithful servant, enter into your master's happiness. And away from me, you evildoers, for I never knew you. This is, I think, the ultimate version of what I'm talking about, having good vision and bad vision. I want to live my life such that when I stand before Jesus on the day of judgment, he can say to me, well done, good and faithful servant, enter into the joy of your master. I'm absolutely terrified of standing before him on judgment day and having him say, I never knew you, depart from me. Absolutely. And this is a really powerful and motivating message at some level. Well, not at some level, at all levels. We don't want to be motivated by fear, but it is important for us to know the consequences of our actions, the consequences of living casually. And that is one of the consequences of living casually, is never knowing the Lord. Being casual towards the Lord is not okay for a variety of reasons. To this end, vision is not just about your job, about the career that you'll have. The more that I spend time in the Word, the more I'm convinced that your career doesn't really matter that much to the Lord. Like it matters, because all things matter to the Lord, because He wants to have intimacy with you. He wants to be a part of everything that you are doing. But whatever you do does not matter that much in the long term. It's important that you're doing the Lord's work, and that whatever work you're doing unto the Lord. When it comes to career, that's what matters. Knowing, now obviously the Lord does call certain people into certain career paths, because that's what the Lord wants you to do, and that's where He wants you to be working. But if you don't have, I say this to the people who don't know specifically what the Lord wants them to do for a job, don't freak out about it. As long as you are doing the work that the Lord has called you to, and whatever work you're doing excellently, because excellence honors the Lord, as far as I'm concerned, you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. Are we clear there? Good. You should also be having vision for your future marriage, for your family, for your money, for your ministry, for friendships, for relationship with the Lord, for the things that really matter. You should have a vision that you are working towards as much as you are able. For marriage, you have to think about what's the kind of woman you want to marry. And are you becoming the kind of man that woman would marry and follow in marriage? When it comes to family, what kind of family culture do you want to have? And when I'm talking about family culture, I'm talking about your children specifically. How are you going to raise your children? What are you going to raise them? Because this is especially important, how you're going to raise your children, because this has been such a casual thing that for the generations that are still alive, most of the parents who are alive in our country have treated raising children very casually. It's been provide food on the table and a roof over their heads and clothes on their backs. And that's excellent, but that's the bare minimum as far as I'm concerned. The absolute bare minimum. You should be teaching them values. And it's your job as the man. It's your job as the man to lead the household, to instill the kind of culture that you want. For your money, it's important to think about, it's one thing to say, I want to have $1 million, but can you steward the money that you have now well enough to be trusted with $1 million? Because if a lot of people, if they got $1 million right now, they'd spend it all and then they'd be back where they were, broke. So you have to think, especially with money, you have to think about, how am I going to steward what I have now well, so that I can eventually be trusted with that level of money? Or how can I steward my money well now so that I can make it to that level of money? For your ministry, every one of you should have a ministry of some kind. Doesn't matter what field you're in. Ministry is not just a thing that pastors have. It's a thing that we all should have. Whether it's, I have an evangelism ministry because I go out to campus like you do. I go out to campus and I evangelize to the students there. Or like what I'm doing. I want to train young men to become better men. I want to get them from a lot of the boyish tendencies that young men have into having some really solid masculine traits that will allow them to lead and to do well in life. That's my ministry, and it's not even a part of any of the career paths necessarily that I'm going down. But it's still the ministry that I'll be doing my whole life long, at least as far as I'm aware. with your friendships. It's really important that you have good friendships that are healthy for you, and also should be friendships that you're the healthy one, if that makes sense. Friendships that pour into you and friendships that you pour into. It's not just about, especially when we want to make disciples and we want to bring people up and to help make them better and to deliver them, have some real deliverance in people's lives, it's important that we're around people who need deliverance. And we're not just around the Jordans and the Reed Robinsons all the time. Those guys are great, and they pour into us most of the time. But they pour into us so that we can pour into other people who need what they're giving to us. And the last thing that I would say is it's really important to have vision for is your relationship with the Lord. And especially because we don't really know like how to do the things that the people in this book do. What I mean is, these people are able to do incredible things that have stories told about them for thousands of years in this book, because they had a relationship with the Lord that warranted that level of power in their life. And I want that. I want to be able to see some of the things that happen, at least some of them, to see some of the things that have happened here in the book of Acts happen in my life. And that means I have to be working towards a relationship with the Lord. And, it's a beautiful thing to have a relationship with the Lord, but sometimes it really is work. It really is work sometimes, because you have to grind in prayer and you have to grind in worship. And you have to grind in your ministry, because there comes a point where the Lord says, you can't make this secret anymore. You can't let this continue to just be a private relationship between me and Jesus. At some point it has to go public.
I think to add on to one of your other points as well, about like working for your relationship with the Lord. I think I saw a post somewhere saying like if you worked just as hard in your relationship with the Lord as you do with like your work life, your social life, like they said like you'd be surprised with the good that the Lord can do in your life. And that can kind of, I guess, to tie into that last point that you also had made, about like having your relationship with the Lord not being secret, and I guess that'll give you like the confidence to go out and evangelize to, maybe it's a group in a church, maybe it's a men's group like this, maybe it's just some random Joe Schmo on the street. I think hopefully that makes sense, kind of like just trying to tie it all in, just trying to add on to what you had said there.
Yeah. We'll talk about how we spend our time, because that's a very important aspect of all of this. But yes, you're absolutely right.
Okay.
If we spent as much time with the Lord as we do with the thousands of other things that consume our time, we would see the stuff happening in this book happen much more often and with much more frequency, I think.
Glad the way I said it made sense.
Yes. Thank you.
That was my one fear for that.
Now, when in Matthew, when I was reading the away from me, you evildoers, do you think that implies like works-based salvation, or you think that's something else? What he's talking about?
Well, so let me go back to Matthew 7 myself, so I can see what it's saying. So, one of the important things when it comes to taking a small section of a chapter, obviously you can extrapolate things like I'm doing. I'm doing right now. I'm taking two portions of two different scriptures to make a point about vision, when neither of these things are actually about vision in the context Jesus is speaking about. But if you read the passage before, verse 15 through 19, the first thing that Jesus says in verse 15 is, beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing but outwardly are ravenous wolves. You will know them by their fruits. And I think that more often than not is what Jesus is talking about. Because he says to me, he says in verse 21, "Not everyone who says to me, 'Lord, Lord,' will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only the one who does the will of my Father." And that implies that the people who were prophesying in his name and casting out demons in his name and did many deeds of power in his name were not following the will of the Father. There's plenty of other sections where he talks about what the will of his Father is. In that particular verse, I don't think that that's something that you need to be worried about necessarily.
If you're doing those works for yourself and your own glory, then that's something you need to worry about. But if you're doing those things in God, the Holy Spirit drives you to do those things, then you're absolutely in the will of God.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was just like curious about like what you know how you would go about it. I know like you know, but I just wanted to bring it up.
Right. Yeah, you know, a lot of the New Testament talks about doing good works, believe it or not. Even though we know that our salvation does not come from any work that we do, there is work that is basically required of us now that we're redeemed, because we're saved, and now we have to help take part in the saving.
I think that ties into what you had mentioned way at the beginning about like not being stagnant. Like, just because we've been saved by the Lord doesn't mean we get to sit by and be like, all right, I'm gonna wait for the Lord to come pick me up.
Yeah,
It doesn't
there's a whole book or a whole letter that Paul wrote to people who did exactly that. To people who did exactly that. They said, the Lord's coming back, so I'm just going to hang around and do whatever. He's like, no, be found working when he comes back. Be found working. So, a little bit of a play on words. Be careful what you focus on. Having vision, what you're looking at. Great stuff. Be careful what you focus on, because what you give your attention to is what you treasure. And in the context that we're talking about, having a vision and working towards it, your time and your attention are the same thing. They're a resource that you are devoting to stuff. So if you spend a lot of time focusing on what's going on Instagram, you're also spending your time there. Your attention and your time are in the same place. We all know the story about Peter walking on the water alongside Jesus, and he takes his eyes off Jesus and he starts to sink. That is a pretty good picture of this. You take your eyes off the Lord, you start to sink. And
It reminds me of Chaos.
Mhm.
Peter, like, Jesus was like clarity and vision and all that, and then but Peter focused on like the doubt, like the water, and which was like the doubt, like because he doubted, he looked at the water and then
That's true.
little faith.
But the other thing, yes, that is good. He doubted. But the thing to keep in mind is why did he doubt? Why did he doubt in that story?
Could be many reasons. I feel like I'm not sure why Peter doubted, but like eyes off the Lord. I think.
I think that it's because if you read the passage, it says that there was loud thunder and lightning and tall waves. That's a lot of distraction, especially when you're walking on the water.
I see.
It's not a calm sea that he's walking on. And it's not a calm world that we're walking through. It is a very chaotic world that can take your attention off, which is why being intentional with how you spend your time, how you spend your attention, is really important. And this is part of why worship is also really important. We all should be practicing worship, not just prayer, not just Bible reading, but worship on our own time. Because this is a way that we are able to turn our attention and our affections to the Lord. Worship is really powerful because what you worship is what you start to become like. And what you worship is also, at some level, what you spend the most time thinking about, what you spend the most time talking about, what you spend the most time working alongside or looking forward to being able to do. And like I said, sometimes worship is absolutely work, and worship is not always about the amount of time that you put in. But if we say I worship the Lord, but I spend 4 hours in front of my TV every day watching Netflix, do I really worship the Lord? And a lot that could be said there. To this end, if we want to have good vision for all of these things, for our marriages and our family and our money and our ministry and our friendships and our relationships with the Lord and our careers, it is important that we have good priorities and that we remove stuff from our life that doesn't really matter. There is a lot of neutral things. How many of you were here when Jordan talked about the things that kill your intimacy? The 5 things that kill your intimacy. You were here?
Yep.
I know you were there. Pretty sure.
How long ago was it?
That was this past Thursday.
Oh, I was at the skating team.
Oh, okay.
Heard a little bit of it. Not all of it.
You were there. So, one of the things that Jordan said, and I am so glad that he said it, neutral things kill your relationship with the Lord. They kill your intimacy because they take your attention away. When we talk about neutral things, what do I mean? I mean that there are good things, there are bad things, and the bad things are sinful things. We know to stay away from those. But then there are neutral things that aren't good or bad per se, but those good or bad things can take away a lot of our time. These are things like movies and books that don't really teach you anything, and your pleasurable hobbies, if you will. These things can become idols if we give them a lot of our attention, if we give them a lot of our time. They can become idols. What did I say last week? Gold and silver are neutral things. They're neither good nor bad, but out of them you can make idols. And out of them you can also make a temple for the Lord.
Just beat me to it by 1 second. I was gonna phrase it in a different way, of course, but you beat me to it by 1 second.
Yeah. And this is part of why the Lord is so keen on us really worshiping Him, having Him on the throne of our lives, because what we focus on is what we become more like. You'll notice that people who all have really similar hobbies that they're into kind of have their own lingo for every hobby that there is. There's their own little language. It's because they're becoming like the other people that they're surrounding themselves with, but also because they're becoming like the thing that they are spending the most time focusing on. Not necessarily a bad thing, but something to keep in mind as we look at our lives. How much do I spend on my video games and my silly books that don't really matter, and my movies and my TV shows, and am I allowing these things to take away from my ability to do the rest of life, the things that matter well? So I would encourage you to spend some time with the Lord and say, hey, what are the things that I need to really remove from my life? Because if I don't, I'll make them an idol. If I don't, they will impact my ability to execute on the vision that I have for my family and for my marriage. There are things that the Lord has given to us that we have to use wisely, and one of them is our time. One of them is our attention. And you'll notice too, I've noticed this more and more, when I spend a lot of time on things that aren't necessarily good or bad, but aren't good things that the Lord has given to us to focus on, I find that it becomes harder to do basic things like pray for people. It becomes harder to at least do that sort of thing well. Because then I kind of have to, it's like I'm on my back foot, if that makes sense. I'm being pushed backwards when I spend a lot of time focusing on stuff that doesn't matter, and then I have an opportunity to minister to somebody. When I'm spending a bunch of time away from the Lord, not focusing on the good things that the Lord's doing and the things that the Lord has given to me to steward, when I'm not focusing on those things and then I have an opportunity to minister, it's like I've been knocked backwards and I'm trying to get back into a good fighting stance almost to do this thing well. And I'm not able to throw as good punches because I'm on my back foot and I have to throw some pretty weak punches at whatever it is I'm ministering to. Ultimately, this life is, and this is also really important, when you start to getting into these when you start thinking about the kind of vision that you want for your marriage and your family and your life in general, it's important that you don't just think about what you want, but what the Lord wants. Because maybe He does want you to go into a specific career field. And if He wants you to go into a specific career field, it would behoove you to spend some time asking Him what that field is and figuring out how to get there alongside Him. He definitely has a way that He wants you to do marriage and family. He definitely has a way that He wants you to do ministry. Definitely has a way He wants you to do relationship with Him. So spend some time with Him and get your marriage get your marriage with the Lord centered around what He would like for your life. His way is always better. Not necessarily easier, not necessarily pain and suffering free, but it is so much better. And you will love your life so much more than if you allow 1,000 things to take up your time.
And I think by extension, listening to the Lord, He'll tell you like what you need to hear, I think, as well.
Mm-hmm.
Because I wanted to let you know of this as well. I just forgot until now. I've actually started to, get that reconnection with the Lord after what happened 2 weeks ago. It's still slow. It's not fully reconnected like I hoped it would be, but just even that small reconnection of whatever value it has, it speaks volumes. So just thought I would add that in there.
Yeah. It is,
I'll tell you more about it later.
this life is not about the life that you want. It is about the life that the Lord wants you to live. Could somebody pull up 1 Corinthians chapter 6? 1 Corinthians chapter 6, please.
Got it.
Verse 20, please.
20. Alright. You were bought at a price, therefore honor God with your bodies.
Therefore, honor God with your bodies. You were bought with a price. Other versions will say, you were bought with a price. Your life is not your own. Therefore, honor God with your bodies. You're not your own. Not anymore. So, as much as you want to get all this great vision for your life and live your best life is whatever the Lord says your best life is. Because your life isn't yours anymore. And if somebody could pull up Revelation... Actually, you know what? I'll do this one. You guys can go to Revelation chapter 2, but I will do this one. This is a really important thing for us to read about and hear. Because we can say all day long, your life is no longer your own, and you should be living the way that the Lord does. And sometimes we can forget what lies at the end of that. I said this last week. When Abraham gives his promise to God, God's promise to Abraham says, I will be your shield, and I will be your very great reward. But there are other things that the Lord gives us at the end of our lives for living in a fashion that is pleasing to Him. So, in Revelation chapter 2, it starts with the message to Ephesus, because John has been given a message that Jesus wants him to send to the 7 churches. And at the end of each of them, it says something like this. And I'm going to read all of them. So to the church in Ephesus, he says, "To everyone who conquers, I will give permission to eat from the tree of life that is in the paradise of God." To the church in Smyrna, he says, "Whoever conquers will not be harmed by the second death." To the church in Pergamum, he says, "To everyone who conquers, I will give some of the hidden manna, and I will give a white stone, and on the white stone is written a new name that no one knows except the one who receives it." To the church in Thyatira, he says, "To everyone who conquers and continues to do my works to the end, I will give authority over the nations, to rule over them with an iron rod, as when clay pots are shattered. Even as I also receive authority from my Father, to the one who conquers I will also give the morning star." To the church in Sardis, he says, "If you conquer, you will be clothed like them in white robes, and I will not blot your name out of the book of life. I will confess your name before my Father and before his angels." To the church in Philadelphia, he says, "If you conquer, I will make you a pillar in the temple of my God. You will never go out of it. I will write on you the name of my God and the name of the city of my God, the new Jerusalem that comes down from my God out of heaven, and my own new name." This is Jesus speaking. And finally, to the church in Laodicea, he says, "To the one who conquers, I will give a place with me on my throne, just as I myself conquered and sat down with my Father on his throne." These are crazy rewards that you get. And it's important for us to know this because this changes, especially the part where it says you'll rule nations alongside me. You'll sit on the throne that I sit on, just as I sit on my Father's throne. This life that we have now is training for something that's way bigger than any of us really fully can know at this point. This life is training, and we cannot treat it casually. And we cannot have casual visions when we have such an incredible, indefinite God. I'll finish with this. There's a man by the name of Jordan Peterson that I'm sure some of you know about and have listened to quite a bit of. And one of the things that, first of all, his interpretation of the Bible is trash. Just so you're tracking. Like, that man needs Jesus.
I thought they found Jesus.
I don't know. But one thing that really stands out to me is that, I don't know how many years ago he said this, but he said something along the lines of, people sometimes ask me if I believe in God. And he says he doesn't really know how to answer the question because he knows that to actually believe in God, to say that you believe in God, means something that most people who say they believe in God do not grasp. Basically, what his problem with saying that he believes in God is that, does he actually act like there is a God? Does he actually live like it? And that's the thing that keeps him from saying, I don't really want to definitively answer that question, or at least however many years ago he said this. And I think that that's really telling, that a guy who doesn't really believe what we believe thinks that. Does it make sense why this is an interesting thing for him to say, or at the very least a really tough thing to say?
Because I think it loops back to what you said, what was mentioned about how these lives that we have now, because we were saved by the blood of Jesus, these lives are now no longer our own.
Yeah. Yeah, and a lot of us do not live like it.
Yeah. And to say that you have been saved by the Lord, that you believe in God, means that you have an obligation now to do, X, Y, Z, whatever the Lord sets out for you, because that's what the Lord wants for you.
Yeah. All this to say, get with the Lord and get a vision for your life that you can act upon. Have big dreams that you're working towards. Have big dreams that you cannot do without the Lord actively working in your life. That is important for us to have. But until that time, have a vision for your future marriage. Have a vision for your relationship with the Lord. Have a vision for your family, how you're going to raise your children.
Verse came to me, he who believes in me, as the scriptures had said, out of his, I think, inner being or belly will come rivers of living water.
Yeah.
And I think that's like the empowering thing too, is like us brothers speaking to each other, having that empowerment come out, and that's like unstoppable.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And on the flip side of what I'm saying, partnering with the Lord is a really peace-filling thing to do, because I know that I don't have to be the one who gets it all together. I will make strides, and I will make plans, and I will work towards having an accomplished vision, but I'm not doing this by myself. And you can especially rest easy if you've consulted the Lord on these things. And that's the end of the recording. Like I said at the beginning, getting a vision for your life is one of the most important things that a man can do. Because if you don't have a direction you're taking your life, if you don't have a thing that you're pursuing in life, how can you pursue it relentlessly? How can you live relentlessly for nothing? So go get a vision so you can live relentlessly. Take care, guys. I love you. Bye.